Hello landlord and agents, thank you for taking the time out to view Fenland District Council's alternative Spring 2021 Landlord Forum. Firstly, I'd like to extend the Council's appreciation to landlords on how challenging this year has been for the local community and businesses, particularly the restrictions placed on landlord practices. Our teams here at FDC have been very busy engaging with local businesses and residents and providing guidance on how to access national COVID support schemes, with housing teams focusing their support to landlords and tenants who have been faced with unprecedented tenancy matters. Whilst understandably, landlords have been frustrated with not being able to exercise their legal powers via normal due process, and Fenland officers have no magic powers to alleviate or resolve matters quickly, the feedback from landlords in respect to officer intervention has been very positive and very much appreciated, and officers will endeavour to continue to support landlords and tenants as we continue on the road out of lockdown. Unfortunately, on this occasion, we are not joined by our NLA representative. Therefore, the private sector team and our partners will be providing you with legal updates and amendments on topical matters affecting the private sector over the last year. We are joined by our colleagues from CAMS Fire and Rescue, Environmental Health Services Manager, and a team from the Private Sector Housing Department. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and I hope you find the content useful. I'll hand over to Jo Evans from the Private Sector Housing team.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy, for that introduction, and hello landlords and letting agents. Welcome to the Spring 2021 Landlord event hosted by Fenland District Council. Well, wow, what a year it's been. Who could have predicted what lay ahead when we last met last year in 2020 at the Boathouse? Unfortunately, we're not able to welcome you in person this year, but I do hope that you're all comfortable at home and having a cuppa in hand ready for our first rather unconventional Landlord Forum for 2021. Well, fortunately, private landlords are robust and tenacious human beings, and by the very nature of their businesses are equipped to deal with the strange and unexpected. So I'm sure that most of you found innovative ways of managing your properties remotely during the pandemic. However, no matter how dynamic a landlord is, that shouldn't detract from the frustration and financial effects caused by a minority of tenants who have taken advantage of the COVID restrictions. As Councillor Hoy alluded to earlier, some landlords will have found themselves in a catch-22 situation, where tenants have breached their contract, but landlords have been powerless in remedying the situation. Fortunately, those landlords who are familiar with our team have reached out for our advice and support. And in most cases, our officers have been able to mediate, negotiate on behalf of landlords so that a temporary solution can be agreed until such a time when landlords can take alternative action. We therefore encourage landlords and agents who are experiencing tenancy issues to seek advice from our officers, including our housing options team, at the earliest opportunity. As you're aware, landlords can still serve notices, but only in severe situations, for example, when there's been severe antisocial behaviour or severe rent arrears equating to around 6 months worth of arrears. And as most of you may have experienced, if you leave those breaches and don't deal with them at an early stage, then leaving them to fester in the hope that the problem will rectify itself isn't really a reality. In situations where tenants have lost their job during COVID, resulting in an increase of arrears, the council can assess whether a tenant might be eligible for discretionary housing benefit payments to reduce or clear those arrears. And where evidenced in their applications, payments can be made direct to the landlord. So it is worth landlords asking help, seeking help from the local authority. If you don't ask, you don't get. As part of the council's response to COVID, advice documents have been made available to landlords. And you may remember last September, I emailed you with some documents and advice around keeping your tenants safe during COVID. In response to the increase in number of positive COVID cases in the district since Christmas, the council's response group will be communicating with tenants and landlords again, with specific focus on HMOs, and to provide additional guidance to landlords and tenants as to how to prevent transmission and how to access grants in the events that tenants haven't been able to work and have had to self-isolate. Copy of this communication is available on the Private Sector Housing website page and will be updated regularly. We therefore encourage landlords and agents to access this information and feed that to their tenants at the earliest and safest opportunities. So, reflecting back to October 2018, when Fenland District Council implemented the online HMO application process to coincide with the amendments to the National Mandatory Licensing Scheme. The team have processed nearly 80 voluntary HMO applications since that date. And whilst we accept this figure is relatively low, compared to the percentage of HMOs identified during the previous year's proactive inspection regime, I think we all agreed at the time and anticipated that only professional landlords, most likely those of you who are watching this presentation today, would be the ones to come forward and voluntarily license their properties. And it would be fair to say that those landlords without a conscience, those who don't have the desire to work with a local authority or do not think that they should do right by their tenants, are not likely to voluntarily apply for a HMO licence. And it's these landlords who are being targeted and are subject to the council's new robust housing enforcement policy, which was adopted in September 2019. The policy enables officers to hold non-compliant landlords to account and instigate formal proceedings where it is evident that landlords have the opportunity to resolve matters prior to the council's interventions and have chosen not to comply. This vigorous approach has resulted in an increased number of Housing Act notices being served, together with an increase in prosecutions via the civil penalty route. And I have today a table to share with you, identifying exactly what enforcement work our team has been doing since September 2019. And please bear in mind that most of this has been done through the COVID restrictions. So therefore, we are expecting enforcement action to increase once officers are able to go out and carry on with proactive visits. So you'll see from the table, since the 11th of September 2019, the team have served a total of 50 improvement notices, a total of 38 civil penalty notices, of which 26 have been enforced with final civil penalty notices. The total amount of income that we've had during that time is 48,384, but we do have a significant way to go in recovering the debt that's still outstanding from those 26 civil penalty notices which have been served. And we are working together with our legal team to instigate formal court proceedings in order to recover that debt. So I think you'll see from the table that officers have been working very, very hard. There has been a total of £194,604 worth of civil penalty notices that have been issued. And some of that has been subject to review, which has reduced the total amount. However, our officers are committed to recovering that debt, and it's that commitment that I wish to share with you today. I hope that's opened your eyes to exactly what the team have been doing over the last 12 months. And it's credit to my colleagues for having enforced our housing enforcement policy. So let me carry on. So over the last year, you'll know that some additional legislation, the periphery housing legislation, has come into effect, mainly the electrical safety regulations. They came into effect technically from 1st of April 2020, requiring all landlords to ensure that they have an electrical safety certificate for all of their properties, including HMOs and single family lets. From the 1st of April 2021, landlords will be required to issue an electrical safety installation report to all of their tenants, whether they're existing tenants or new tenants. The new regulations will require all landlords to commission an EICR report that they need to give to their tenants by the 1st of April 2021, and those certificates need to be available to the local authority should it be requested. So the team have interpreted these regulations, and we've devised a process map which sets out the various steps required by the landlord and details enforcement where there is non-compliance. This process will be available on our website in due course. Later on in the webinar, Michelle Page, my colleague, will explain the regulations in more detail. And again, the slides that Michelle will show will be available to you, and details of how to access them will be available at the end of the presentations. And please feel free to write down any questions about what I've had to say or anything our presenters will be discussing today. And you'll be able to email the team afterwards and we'll be providing you with a list of frequently asked questions with answers being available on our website from the 10th of April. So I'd now like to pass you on to my colleague from CAMS Fire Safety, Steve Fleming, and Steve is going to talk to you today about the safety requirements and the recent amendments that have been made over the last year in relation to both single family lets and houses in multiple occupation. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Fleming. I'm a station commander within Cambridge Fire and Rescue. I'm one of the fire protection policy managers. Today I'm going to talk to you around fire safety within an HMO. Many as are setting off on the journey and might be retrofits or brand new purpose-built building for HMOs. So again, legislation, we're going to talk about legislation, some guidance, and again, where you can get that further support from the Fire and Rescue Service. Today, firstly, we'll talk about the fire risk assessments. One of the most important things within the Fire Safety Order 2005 is part of your responsibility as the owner of the premises. That will have to be undertaken by a competent person. Again, there's many registered businesses out there that will undertake that for you, or we can give some guidance if you feel confident yourself and you have the appropriate qualification and experience. One of the biggest questions we are asked sits around what kind of fire alarm system goes into your premises. That will all depend on what size your premises is, how many floors it has. But as a minimum, we will require a British standard BS 5839 Part 6. It is an LD3 standard. But again, further guidance is open in the British standard, as well as contacting the fire service as well. When the fire alarms are being fitted, we expect the fire alarms to be interlinked and mains wired, as well as battery backup. Again, further guidance is available from ourselves if required when you're getting the quotes, and again, when you're setting off on that journey. Fire doors is a massive one for us as well, because again, it will protect the escape route for your residents within your property. We expect to see FD30 doors, 30-minute fire assistant doors, or a substantial door on the self-closing device that will protect the escape route and the stairs, etc., in the event of a fire within one of the rooms. One of the major things that's missed is emergency lighting. Again, that sits under British Standard 5266, and there's further guidance for that. Normally, that will be in the escape routes with signage to let everybody out of the premises. Again, it all depends on how big your premises is. When you're introducing residents to the property, it's important to make them aware of any of the risks and procedures within your property, the procedure for evacuation, and again, it is recommended that you put within your contract a clause that states that any tampering with any of the fire detection within your property can lead to any serious consequences. Again, within the contract, it is recommended that we talk about maintenance. It is your responsibility to maintain the systems you put within your premises on a weekly, monthly, and annual basis, and they should be regularly tested. If a fire alarm is within somebody's room or flat, we recommend that within their contract it stipulates that you have access to that to carry out the maintenance within that property. There's a number of guidances out there. The government guidance around sleeping, and also the Cllr's guidance, which will give you further insight into the compartmentation requirements, fire alarm requirements, and again, general overall risk assessment of the premises itself. Cambridge Fire and Rescue are available at any point for free advice and can be contacted through our website, or again, contacting through our central policy team situated in Huntingdon. If at any point you're not too sure around the guidance for your property, please contact us at the earliest convenience. As I say, our advice is free, and we will continue to guide you through the process to make your premises compliant. Our main legislation sits within the Fire Safety Order, and we can inspect the premises around the common areas at any point. We normally work quite closely with the enforcement housing teams, And again, as I said, we are all there for guidance moving forward. I'll now pass you over to Alan Pratt of the Environmental Services to talk to you about refuge and recycling in the rental sector.
Hello, my name is Adam Pratt, Environmental Services at Fenland District Council. I'm just here to talk a little bit about obviously the waste and recycling collections and the garden waste from tenanted properties. So again, I'm just going to run through some general stuff about the bins, a little bit about garden waste, a bit where tenants can find out more information, and also details of leaflets and where they can find extra information. Okay, so kicking off, all properties across Fenland receive a alternate weekly collection of general waste, that's the green bins, and dry recycling, that's the blue bins. So every 2 weeks, 1 week's general waste, following week recycling. Also, it's a subscription-based garden waste service. Basically, £38 a year if you sign up through direct debit, or £45 a year if you pay cash or one-off payment. So they're the main services we offer. Again, the garden waste is a paid-for service. Again, alternate weekly collections every 2 weeks. So again, a little bit more about the services we provide. Obviously, general waste is everything that can't go in the recycling bin, essentially. So that's a green 240 bin, two-wheeled bin, standard size. That's what every property gets. And then the same again, 240 litre bin for dry recycling. The dry recycling, again, should be the bulk of materials that are generated through the household. So if you think, like, in layman's terms, basically it's all metal, tins, cans, aerosols, plastic bottles, paper and cardboard, and glass bottles and jars. So again, that's the bulk of the waste that people generate. So again, really more going into the recycling than the general waste. Again, on that, for tenanted properties and properties across the board, to be honest, additional bins are available. There are set criteria for that. So if 5 or more are in the household, they're entitled to another blue dry recycling bin. If there are 6 or more in the household and 2 recycling bins are already in place and they're still struggling, they can have another 240 litre general waste bin. So the maximum number of bins we can provide for any one standalone property is 2 dry recycling bins if there's 5 or more in the household, and 2 240 litre general waste bins if there are 6 or more in the household and the recycling's already going on. With that, we do have the household waste recycling centres. These are run by the county council, so at Fenland we don't have any control over those, but tenants can take any additional waste to these sites. There are restrictions with landlords taking the waste to the sites. It's classed as commercial waste then, but if tenants have got extra waste, or I don't know, changing mattress, anything like that, they can take the waste to the sites themselves. And again, they're the 3 sites across Fenland, one in Wisbeach, one in March, and one in Whittlesea. But again, they are operated by the county council. Again, at the moment, there are restrictions on number of people who can visit the sites at any one time. So cambridgeshire.gov.uk for more information on the recycling centres. Other services that Fenland do provide, we do a bulky waste collection service. These are for larger items that can't go in the domestic waste stream, so it won't go in the green 240 litre bin. These are things like settees, fridges, cookers, things like that. The service can be booked online. I'll give you a bit more information about that shortly. But again, it's from 1st of April, it's £30 for 4 items. So if you had a table, a 3-piece suite, so 2 sofas and 2 1-seater sofas and a 2-seater sofa, say that would cost £30 for us to collect it. Again, it can all be applied for online, and if you've got additional items, it's £7.50 for an additional item. Again, all the details of that on our website, fenland.gov.uk. You'll be able to find it on there. Something else I'm going to talk, probably the most handy thing landlords, tenants like, is probably our bin app. On there, you enter your address, and it'll show when bin collection day is. It'll set reminders to your phone calendar. You can put multiple addresses on there as well. So again, it just acts as a reminder for when bin day is. Also via that, you can book a bulky waste collection, and there's also a direct link to find out what goes in what bin, and it's a web page that's been developed by our Getting It Sorted volunteers. But in that, it does go into detail what can go in each bin, and also has it in a variety of sort of community languages. So Latvian, Lithuanian, Romanian, all those sort of languages are covered on there. So again, it's something to direct the tenants to as well. Going on a little bit more, again, I know some HMOs, tenanted properties, if we've got a number of people in there, as a landlord, they may require additional waste services. As I said previously, the maximum number of bins that we can provide for a house is 2 recycling, 2 general waste, providing the criteria met, and that's all we can provide. If you did want an additional service, we can offer like a trade waste service for any additional waste that may be generated at the property. Just to give you an idea on the prices for that, so for an additional 240 litre general waste bin collected every week, 240 bin holds between 4 and 5 sacks. The cost of that would be £4.95 a week. Again, if it was like going up to an 1100 litre bin, they're like the 4-wheel commercial bins, you can get 18-20 sacks into that. The price of that would be £10.25 a week, and that's collected every week. So just to give you a rough idea of the other options available, because again, any waste that's generated at the property above the standard bins, it would be a case of going to a licensed waste provider and arranging additional collections. So that was some details of the services that we can provide above and beyond the standards. So ranging from £5 a week to sort of £10.25 a week, depending on what the need is really. We can provide additional collections, but again, there is a cost to it, being above and beyond the normal, like our normal standards. So again, details on that can be found on our website, and again, my emails through info@fenland.gov.uk will find its way through to the relevant person. Moving on to a bit about what information's available. Again, I've mentioned the bin app. The bin app's probably the best go-to place. It's easy, it's convenient, and it will give you the basic information there. And again, it's something the tenants can look at as well. At the moment, we're delivering our collection calendars, so they're being put onto the green general waste bins. Again, that just gives more information around bank holiday dates and what bins we're collecting each week. Again, the bin app does do everything that the calendar does, but again, it's something that goes out there, and again, it has details on our website where to find out more information. Again, other information that I know we're going to be working with the housing team to knock together like a landlord pack. But again, the sort of information we have like our recycling guides. It just details what can go in each of the bins, information on the recycling centres. So that is something that it'll include. We also have foreign language guides as well, like a leaflet. Again, it's something that's quite handy. We have pictorial guides on what can go into the blue bin. Again, it's something that may be of use. It can be like left in the properties, and it's a clear visual guide on what can go into the blue recycling bin. And again, also like on the landlord pages, there are links to various posters and things that you can download. So there's a range of information out there. We are going to be working with the housing team to put together like a landlord pack, which hopefully you'll find useful. But yeah, again, with the waste, the key things to remember is like the importance of the residents understanding what goes in each bin. If we have say a recycling bin presented full of general waste, then we can't collect it. The bin will be rejected. Then they'll have to be sent some clear bags, sort the contents of the bin out, and yeah, it causes a bit of inconvenience before the next collection, basically. Obviously the tenants have to sort it out, then they'll have to store the recycling in the clear bags ready for the next collection. So ultimately, making sure the tenants understand the collection system, that's key to it. So if you stop any issues in the first place, it'll save the problems escalating, build up of waste in the property, things like that. And then obviously if there's a build up of waste, obviously the neighbours start complaining, our environmental protection may become involved. So it's best to make sure residents have full understanding of what they need to do. Again, it's like they need to put the bins out for collection as well. We ask really like no later than 7 AM on day of collection, and best bet put the bin out the night before. So yeah, making sure the residents fully understand it. The system is the key thing. Website, best way to find that information. Bin up, the simplest, most straightforward point of contact as well, to be fair. Again, we're looking to develop the landlord packs, and we'll put all the relevant information we have. So it's something you can have delivered to your properties to make sure the tenants have got understanding of the services we provide. Again, website, bin app, they're the first points of contact. There's a range of information on there. So yeah, I think that's about it from me. I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover over. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Michelle Page. I'm a Fenland District Council housing officer for private sector housing. I'm here today to give you a brief overview of the Electrical Safety Regulations 2020. So I'll begin. So how do the new regulations affect private landlords? The majority of landlords are proactive when it comes to ensuring the safety of their tenants and make a welcome contribution to the housing market. But unfortunately, a majority fail to do so, putting their tenants in danger as a result. These new regulations require landlords to have the electrical installations in their properties inspected and tested by a person who is qualified and competent, and that needs to happen at least every 5 years. Landlords have to provide a copy of the electrical safety report to their tenants and to their local authority if requested. This means that all landlords will have to do what landlords already do, make sure the electrical installations in their properties are safe. The regulations came into force on the 1st of June 2020 and form part of the government's wider work to improve safety in all residential premises and particularly in the rented sector. This is a major step towards levelling up the private rented sector, making sure it will offer high quality, safe and secure housing. Along with our social and owner occupied sectors, this is housing the country deserves. So what exactly do the electrical safety standards in the private rented sector, bracket England, unbracket regulations 2020, require? In a nutshell, landlords of privately rented accommodation must ensure national standards for electrical safety are met. These are set out in the 18th edition of the wiring regulations, which are published as British Standard 7671. They must ensure the electrical installations in their rented properties are inspected and tested by a qualified and competent person at least every 5 years. They must obtain a report from the person conducting the inspection and test, which gives the results and sets a date for the next inspection and test. Landlords must supply a copy of this report to the existing tenant or tenants within 28 days of the inspection and test. Alternatively, the landlord can put those reports on the communal board. They must supply a copy of this report to a new tenant before they occupy the premises. Landlords must also supply a copy of this report to any prospective tenant within 28 days of receiving a request for the report. They must also supply the local authority with a copy of this report within 7 days of receiving a request for a copy. Landlords should retain a copy of the report to give to the inspector and tester who will undertake the next inspection and test. Where the report shows that remedial work is necessary or further investigation must take place, they must complete this work or further investigation within 28 days or a shorter period of time if specified as requested in the report. They should supply written confirmation of the completion of the remedial works from the electrician and provide this to the tenant and the local authority within 28 days of completion of the works. So which rented properties do the electrical safety regulations apply to? The regulations came into force on the 1st of June 2020 and they apply to new tenancies from the 1st of July 2020 and existing tenancies from the 1st of April this year 2021. The relevant date for determining when the new requirements apply is the date on which the tenancy is granted. So a new tenancy is one that was granted on the 1st of June 2020. If a private tenant has a right to occupy a property as their only or main residence and pays rent, then the regulations apply. This includes assured short-hold tenancies and licences to occupy. Exceptions are set out in Schedule 1 of the regulations and include social housing, lodgers, those on a long-term lease of 7 years or more, student halls of residence, hostels and refuges, care homes, hospitals and hospices, and any other accommodation relating to healthcare provisions. So what about houses in multiple occupation, HMOs? So the majority of landlords realise a house in multiple occupation is a shared property rented out by at least 3 people who are not from one household, for example, a family, but share facilities like the bathroom and kitchen. If a HMO is a tenant's only or main residence and they pay rent, then these regulations apply to the HMO. The management of houses in multiple occupation, (England) and (Regulations 2006) previously put specific duties on landlords around electrical safety. This requirement has now been repealed, and HMOs are now covered by the new electrical safety regulations. HMOs with 5 or more tenants are licensable. The Housing Act 2004 has been amended by these regulations to require a new mandatory condition in HMO licences, ensuring that every electrical installation in the HMO is in proper working condition and safe for continued use. So we'll move on to the inspection. How do you find a qualified and competent person to carry out the test? The regulations require landlords to have the electrical installations in their properties inspected and tested by a person who is qualified and competent at least every 5 years. Guidance has been produced by the electrical safety industry that covers how landlords can choose a qualified and competent inspector and tester. This includes, but is not limited to, electrical safety roundtable, and also the registered competent person, electrical single mark and register. So you can pop online and find those. The electrical safety industry has established competent person schemes. Membership of these will not be compulsory to ensure that there's no further pressure placed on the industry, nor undue burden placed on inspectors and testers. When commissioning an inspection in order to establish if a person is qualified and competent, landlords can check if the inspector is a member of the Competent People Scheme, or require the inspector to sign a checklist certifying their competence, including their experience, whether they have adequate insurance and hold a qualification covering the current version of the wiring regulations, and the periodic inspection, testing and certification of electrical installations. So what standard should the electrical installation meet? The standards that should be met are set out in the 18th edition of the wiring regulations. The regulations state that a landlord must ensure the electrical safety standards are met and that remedial or investigation work is carried out if the report requires this. The electrical installation should be safe for continued use. In practice, if the report does not require any remedial work or further investigation, the landlord will not be required to carry out that work. What will be inspected and tested? So the fixed electrical parts of the property, like the wiring, the socket outlets, plug sockets, the light fittings and the consumer unit or the fuse box will be inspected. This will include permanently connected equipment such as showers and extractors. What will happen in the inspection? Well, the inspection will find out if any electrical inspections are overloaded, there are any potential electrical shock risks and fire hazards, if there is any defective electrical work, and that there is a lack of electrical or bonding. These are 2 ways of preventing electric shocks that are built into electrical installations. What about electrical applications like cookers, fridge, televisions, etc.? The regulations don't cover electrical appliances, only the fixed electrical installations. We recommend that landlords regularly carry out PAT testing, which is portable appliance testing, on any electrical appliance that they provide, and then supply tenants with a record of any electrical inspections carried out as good practice. Tenants are responsible for making sure that any of the electrical appliances that they use are safe. Tenants and landlords may consider registering their own electrical appliances with a product registration scheme. So now we'll talk about the report itself. As you know, landlords must obtain a report, usually called an Electrical Installation Condition Report, or EICR for short. They must obtain this report from the person conducting the inspection and test, which explains its outcome and any remedial or investigative work required. Landlords must then supply a copy of this report to the tenant or tenants, or again on the communal board, within 28 days of the inspection and test, to a new tenant before they occupy the premises, and to any prospective tenant within 28 days of receiving a request for the report. If the local authority requests it, landlords must supply them with a copy of that report within 7 days of receiving the request. If the report requires remedial work or further investigation, landlords must provide written confirmation that the work has been carried out. They must provide that to the tenant and to the local authority within 28 days of completing the works. Landlords must also retain a copy of the report to give to the inspector and tester who will undertake the next inspection and test. So what does the report show? The electrical installation should be safe for continued use. In practice, if the report does not require any remedial work or further investigation, the landlord will not be required to carry out any further work. Inspectors will use the following classification codes to indicate where a landlord must undertake remedial work, so it's important to check that report. So if you see a C1 or code 1, this means danger present, risk of injury. The electrical inspector may make any C1 hazards safe before leaving the property. If you see a C2 or a code 2, this means it's potentially dangerous and needs urgent remedial work carrying out. Further investigation is highlighted by an IF, which indicates that further investigation is needed without delay. And then a code 3, the final one, which is C3, improvement recommended. It may well be that it could be improved within a 5-year period, but it does mean that further remedial work is not required for the property to be deemed satisfactory. If codes C1 and C2 are identified on the report, then remedial work will be required. The report will state the installation is unsatisfactory for continued use, and we class this as a fail. If an inspector identifies that further investigative work is required, the F1, the landlord must also ensure this is carried out. The C3 classification code does not indicate remedial work is required, but only that improvement is recommended. Landlords don't have to make the improvement, but it would improve the safety of the installation if they did. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about remedial work. If the report shows that remedial work or further investigation is required, landlords must complete this work within 28 days. Or if there's a shorter period set out on the report, they must complete it by that date. Landlords must then provide written confirmation that the work has been carried out to their tenant and to the local authority within 28 days. So what happens if a landlord doesn't do the remedial work? If a local authority has reasonable grounds to believe that the landlord is in breach of one or more of the duties in the regulations, they must serve a remedial notice on the landlord requiring remedial action. Should a landlord not comply with the notice, the local authority may arrange for remedial action to be taken themselves. The local authority can recover the costs of taking the action from the landlord, but the landlord has a right to appeal against a demand for costs. If there's urgent remedial action, for example, if the report indicates that urgent remedial action is required and the landlord has not carried this out within the period specified in the report, i.e. within those 28 days, or as specified, the local authority may, with the consent of the tenant, arrange to carry out remedial works. The local authority must authorise a qualified and competent person in writing to undertake the remedial action and give at least 48 hours notice to the tenant or tenants in the property. The cost for carrying out the remedial work can be recovered from the landlord. So we're going to talk about financial penalties, where local authorities may impose a financial penalty of up to £30,000 on landlords who are in breach of their duties. So can a landlord appeal against local authorities serving a notice, taking remedial action or a financial penalty? Yes, landlords can appeal against the decision of a local authority. In the first instance, landlords have 21 days to make written representations to a local authority against a remedial notice and the intentions to impose a financial penalty. The remedial notice is then suspended until the local authority considers those representations. The local authority must inform the landlord of their decision within 7 days. Landlords then have a right of appeal to the first tier tribunal against the decision to take remedial action by the local authority. An appeal must be made within 28 days from the day on which a remedial notice is served. Landlords also have a right of appeal to the first tier tribunal against a demand for the recovery of costs made by the local authority following remedial action. Landlords also have a right to appeal to the first tier tribunal against the decision to take urgent remedial action by the local authority. Again, an appeal must be made within 28 days from the day on which the work started. An appeal can be made against a financial penalty, and all appeals are made to the first tier tribunal, which is the property chamber. There are a few more questions, such as what if a tenant won't let me in or I can't find an inspector? A landlord's not in breach of their duty to comply with a remedial notice if he or she can show that they have taken all reasonable steps to comply. A landlord could show reasonable steps by keeping copies of all correspondence they have had with their tenants and with electricians as they have tried to arrange the work, including any replies they've had. Landlords may also want to provide other evidence they have that the installation is in a good condition while they attempt to arrange works. This could include the servicing record and previous safety reports. Another question may be if an inspection took place and a satisfactory report was issued before the 18th edition of the wiring regulations came into force, but less than 5 years ago, will a landlord always need to have the property inspected again as soon as the electrical safety regulations came into force? So the answer to that is Regulation 3 requires that landlords have the electrical installation inspected and tested at intervals of no longer than every 5 years. Electrical safety standards, the 18th edition, must be met throughout the period of that tenancy. So the 18th edition came into effect in 2019. So if a landlord already has a report for a property that was carried out after this date and has complied with all other requirements of the regulations, they won't have to have another inspection for 5 years, provided the report does not state that the next inspection should take place sooner. Existing installations that have been installed in accordance with earlier editions of the wiring regulations may not comply with the 18th edition in every respect. This does not necessarily mean that they are unsafe for continued use or require upgrading. It's just good practice for landlords with existing reports to check these reports and decide whether the electrical installation complies with current electrical safety standards. Landlords might also wish to contact the inspector who provided the last report to ensure the installation continues to comply with electrical safety standards. Will all installations have to comply with the 18th edition, even if they were installed before this edition was in force? The regulations state that a landlord must ensure that electrical safety standards are met and that any remedial or investigation work is carried out if the report requires this. The electrical installation should be safe for continued use. In practice, if the report does not require further investigation or remedial work, the landlord will not be required to carry out any further work. Reports can also recommend improvement in addition to requiring remedial works. If a report only recommends improvement but does not require any further investigative or remedial work to be carried out, indicated with the C3 code, then while it would be good practice to carry out this work, it would not be required to comply with regulations. What about new build properties or new installations? If a property is newly built or has been completely rewired, it should have an electrical installation certificate known as an EIC. Landlords can provide a copy of the EIC to tenants and, if requested, the local housing authority. The landlord will not then be required to carry out further checks or provide a report for 5 years after the EIC has been issued, as long as they have complied with their duty or duties under the regulations. Which tenancies do the new regulations apply to? If a private tenant has a right to occupy a property as their only or main residence and pays rent, then the regulations apply. This includes assured short-hold tenancies and licenses to occupy. So my last question is, what about where tenancies roll over into periodic tenancies? Will that count as a new tenancy? Whether or not a periodic tenancy is a new tenancy, as defined in Regulation 2, depends on the type of tenancy issued. For contractual periodic tenancies, where it is written in the original tenancy agreement that on expiry of the fixed term, the tenancy will become periodic. The periodic tenancy will be part of the same tenancy. For statutory periodic tenancies, where on expiry of the fixed term, the tenancy rolls over into a periodic tenancy automatically by statute rather than by contract, the periodic tenancy will be a new tenancy. Properties let on statutory periodic tenancies where the fixed term expires between July 2020 and April 2021 will require an inspection and test at this point under the regulations. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all our presenters for providing us with a thorough update on all the service areas. I'm very proud of the team and what they've achieved despite the difficulties with the COVID pandemic. I hope landlords found the updates relevant and informative, and whilst the format is unusual this year, I trust the landlords and agents appreciate the support and commitment demonstrated by officers in improving standards within the private rented sector. Undoubtedly, some of you have questions following this set of presentations, and I therefore encourage you to forward any inquiries either to your professional landlord organisation or to our private sector housing team. Email details are being shown on the screen now. We also welcome your feedback on the presentation and would ask you to make any suggestions on future formats or preferred topics, and we will do our best to facilitate requests. As mentioned, all slides and tables referred to in the presentation will be available on the Council's private sector housing website from the 10th of April. And those landlords who are on the distribution list will be emailed a link. If you're not registered on this list, please do contact the team on the email provided. Just leaves me to say thanks to you all for attending. Please keep safe, support your tenants in keeping to COVID regulation and guidance, and hopefully we can all look forward to a less restricted spring and summer. Thank you.